Good morning, friends. We're going to wait just a minute more to allow some folks to take seats. We know this very full house reflects the very full heart of St. Thomas. I bid you welcome to First Parish Bridgewater Unitarian Universalist Church. Before we begin the service, I have a couple of housekeeping announcements I want to share. It is a muggy day. We're doing our best with fans, but with so many beloved friends gathered, the temperature may rise. Please take care of your needs. Restrooms are accessible downstairs. There's a lift if you need it, and a stairway out the door to my left. There's also water and cups available in the vestibule. So if you're here in the sanctuary, you may access water through the vestibule if you need it. Please do that. If anyone is in the overflow room, there's also water available there. Tom's family and his friends at First Parish invite all present to stay immediately following the service for reception. Refreshments will be served from the lower parish hall. So you may proceed as you leave out the door to my left and down the stairs. Again, a lift is available should you need it, and a volunteer can be available to help you operate it. Refreshments will be served down in the lower parish hall, but the space is tight, and with the rain, we decided not to use outdoor space. so you can proceed back upstairs to the upper parish hall and find a seat there to connect with others and enjoy your refreshments. If that is full, we're going to invite people to come back into the sanctuary and make yourself comfortable in here. And stay as long as you need to remember and to be together and to nourish yourself. Welcome. Welcome to all who have gathered to remember and to mourn the life and death of Thomas, St. Thomas. My name is Jennifer Johnson, and it is my honor to have served for the past 3 years as minister of First Parish Bridgewater Unitarian Universalist Church, the congregation which Tom made his spiritual home for several decades. In life, Tom's presence loomed large here at First Parish. He was often, usually, the first to welcome a newcomer with his bright, sometimes mischievous smile and his characteristic charm. He looked out for members in times of need. He tended to this building that he loves so much in ways seen and unseen. He shoveled the walkways, he took out the trash, he programmed the thermostat, and he came in early on Sunday mornings to brew our coffee for our after-service fellowship time. Tom helped to lead worship services, sang in the choir, and occasionally graced us with his soulful harmonica playing. Tom loved this place, and he loved its people. He took care of it, and he took care of us. Tom's spirit will abide here. So this morning, it is my great privilege to welcome you, one and all, to Tom's spiritual home. Welcome to his devoted family and wide network of friends. Welcome to the members and friends of First Parish Bridgewater. Welcome to those of you who may not have known Tom directly, but whose lives have been touched by his even still, for we are all connected on this web of life, and Tom would have been the first one to welcome you here this morning. We welcome in spirit those who cannot be here in body, separated by constraints of time and distance. We're grateful for the blessings of technology. As resistant as Tom sometimes was to those developments, he would have been very glad that friends could join this morning by way of Zoom. Most especially, let us hold in spirit the loved ones who preceded Tom in death. Oscar St. Thomas, Grace St. Thomas, Robert Wilson, Ronald Wilson, Gary Langton, Terry St. Thomas, Alan Sheffers, and all those loved ones named silently in each and every heart who have gone before us. We have gathered this morning to extend our hearts in care and compassion, particularly to Tom's cherished surviving family members, the siblings who knew and loved Tom from his earliest days, together with their spouses and children, and especially to those whose lives have been most closely entwined with Tom's, his wife Sue, the love of his life, his adored and adoring children, Lydia, Kyle, and Chloe, and their spouses, Leonildo, Jacqueline, and Luis, and Tom's precious granddaughter, Carolyn, or Linny, who already misses her pops. We gather this morning to pause from the flow of normal time, to create a sacred hour. In this hour, we mark the life and death of one we have known and loved and lost. The world is forever altered by Tom's death, just as it was forever graced by his birth 70 years ago. Tom had such a big and bright presence in life that the void left by his death is especially deep and wide. Here we have gathered to mourn that void and to remember the good life he lived. Here we come to lift up his spirit in memories spoken and held quietly in the tender recesses of our hearts. For it is by remembering, with word and song, laughter, tears, and silence, that we bind Tom's spirit here among the living. Welcome to this house of love and remembrance. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we mark the beginning of worship by kindling a flaming chalice, the symbol of our faith. So at this time, I invite Tom's daughter, Chloe, to come forward to light the chalice, while I share a poem by Mary Oliver, who is an unofficial poet laureate of our UU tradition. It's called In Blackwater Woods. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads me back to this: the fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes, to let it go, to let it go. Many of you know that Tom loved to sing. He sang in the choir here at church, in the BSU alumni choir, and with his friends in the male bonding band. Tom's big, beautiful bass voice will forever echo in this sanctuary that he loves so much, where he faithfully worshiped nearly every Sunday, and where his bold singing, the voice you could hear above all the others, anchored and encouraged the congregation's singing. Tom had several favorites in our UU hymnal, and he selected two for this occasion, for us to sing together. So let us do him proud. Please rise in body or spirit and lend your voice to Tom's song. May nothing evil cross this door. The words will appear on the screen. If you want to use the gray hymnal, it's number 1. We encourage you to use the words so you can lift up your head and sing out.
We
Tom spent the last weeks of his life at home, surrounded by his family and embraced by their abundant love and tender care. As death approached, he requested songs and readings to ease his way. One of the readings he asked for is familiar to many. The words are ancient and holy, a Psalm of David, number 23. Please remain seated and join together in reciting the words. They are again projected on our screen. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. It's hard to believe we are here. Tom had such a robust love of life and such a pronounced life force. It makes it hard to wrap our hearts and minds around the reality of his death, especially because it happened so rapidly. Many of you were still adjusting to the news of his Parkinson's diagnosis and preparing your hearts for different kinds of changes in Tom's life. You were not prepared for terminal brain cancer. For those of you closest to Tom, who shared your days with him, the world may feel entirely changed, new. How does one go on in this changed new world? I wish I had a satisfying answer for you, but I'm afraid I don't. I can't make Tom's death anything different than what it is: heartbreaking. You will be disoriented for a while until your heart has time to mend. And as hard as it may be to believe now, your hearts will mend in time and with love. What I can offer is a beginning, some guidance for how to begin that process of mending, some first baby steps of living in this changed new world without your Tom. This is why we gather, to mark the end of a life of one we have known and loved and lost. We gather to acknowledge our broken hearts and begin the slow work of mending them. We gather to face the reality of a new world together and to begin to reweave the fabric of community that binds us here. How do we do that? First, as Mary Oliver writes, we must let go. We must let go of Tom's physical presence among us. We have to face the truth that we won't see his smile or hear his laughter in real time. He won't impart any new wisdom or crack any new jokes. He has welcomed his last newcomer, brewed his last cup of coffee, sung his last song, uttered his last word, and breathed his last breath. We gather here to name this hard and heartbreaking truth in the care and company of Tom's community of beloveds. This is how we begin to let go. During these hard weeks, leading up to Tom's death. Some of you have shared with me that Tom expressed to you a measure of acceptance, perhaps even peace, with his impending death. I experienced that myself in conversations I shared with him over the past month. Tom assured his son Kyle that he wasn't angry about his fate because he would always take what was his, even when that was a fatal brain tumor. As I've reflected on that, I've begun to think that Tom was doing what Tom does: take care of people. By his own example of acceptance, he was helping to ease the grief of his family and friends, and in doing so, he was teaching us how to let go. Even as we let go of Tom's physical presence, the other way we begin to live in a new world and reweave the fabric of community that holds us together is by keeping Tom here in spirit, by holding on to Tom in memory. This new world is not without Tom. Rather, it shimmers with his spiritual presence, with the legacy of his love and goodness, his gifts of song and laughter and wisdom. We have a part to play in making that new world, this new world, shimmer with the brightness of Tom's legacy. Even as we let go of Tom's physical presence, we are called to hold on to his spiritual presence by remembering his lived life, his good life, well lived, and heeding its lessons. In this way, I believe, we make a heaven for Tom's spirit in our collective memories. It's a tall order, but let us make that heaven deep and wide, expansive and beautiful enough to hold Tom's prodigious spirit and all the gifts he gave to us from it. Now is the time in the service when we begin the sacred task of holding on to Tom in spirit by remembering together. You will hear memories and lessons from his life shared by his sister Mary, his daughter Lydia, and son Kyle, and their memories will spark your own. Even if you did not know Tom, their memories will imprint Tom's spirit on your heart. Interwoven with the memories are musical selections that Tom played a part in choosing for us today. So let us remember. At this time, I invite Tom's sister, Mary McAdam, to come forward to share her remembrance.
Thank you for your beautiful words. Good morning. Thank you, Jennifer. And I'm Mary, Tom's sister. And it's my privilege to share some thoughts about Tom with all of you. I was talking with my daughter, Katie, and wondering what I would say here. And after a moment, she said, "But Mom, there is so much material." As we share the sorrow of Tom's passing, let's turn to lifting each other up clearly to see the joy that Tom brought to us all. Thomas George St. Thomas was born during an early season snowstorm in November. He was named for his Uncle Buddy, who was killed in a car crash 2 years before Tom was born. Our parents gave him a beautiful, meaningful name. Our growing up household of 8 kids was noisy and rambunctious, fractious at times, but full of life and love. Tom was a paper boy, delivering up and down the hills of our neighborhood. He called himself the tardy paper boy. He collected just enough money to pay his bill and buy a candy bar and a grape Fanta at the nearby market. Tom always found a way to make the most of the journey, and he didn't worry about the material goods. On first meeting Tom, you might think he was funny and easygoing. He was, but Tom clearly saw and stood up for what he knew to be right, and he wouldn't back down. We all remember heated discussions at the dinner table between Tom and our dad in the late 1960s. Tom was adamantly opposed to the war in Vietnam. He was courageous and had the strength of his convictions, even as a teenager. He was definitely the rebel, the idealist, the hippie in our house. Tom stood against injustice everywhere. He would not tolerate bullies. He keenly felt the wrongs done to Native Americans and the Jewish people in particular. He learned about them and then educated us. He loved sprinkling in Yiddish words, especially tukas. I'm glad you know what that means. He gained an understanding of deaf culture and learned American Sign Language in support of our brother John's family. Tom was ever curious about everything. He was a true lifelong learner. He was so intelligent, and he had an incredible memory. He made a few trips to Mill Reed to play trivia with us, and we won every time. You definitely wanted him on your team. Okay, but how about the Tom who made everyone laugh? He was so funny and so loud and so goofy and so joyous. He famously set off a car alarm by just having some loud fun at a family cookout. On an uncle's weekend at Joan and Ed's place in Vermont, the guys were considering some afternoon activities after shooting off the potato gun, and someone mentioned they could maybe take naps. And Tom wanted to know, pants off nap? Years ago, we were coming into this church, I think, for contra dancing. There was a big crowd, and lots of people were calling out hello to Tom. He was so glad to be there, so full of life. And finally, he looked around, and he put up his arm in greeting, and he said, "Hi, everyone who knows me." He would call our dad in later years, and Mom always knew it was Tom on the other end because Dad would be laughing so hard. Tom was never one to end the phone conversation. He always had the time for you, and there was always more to say. He wanted to meet everyone and not just make your acquaintance. He wanted to know you and hear your story. He was curious about what you thought, your view of the world, and then he wanted to share a laugh with you. You all know how true this is. Tom's people from his musical groups, this church community, all of Bridgewater, his myriad friends, his nieces and nephews, cousins, family. Tom had so many squads. And with Tom, always music, singing, listening, sharing music, folk music, any music in Nova Scotia, playing the harmonica, violin, and washed-up choir groups, bands, sharing his talent and his beautiful bass voice with us all. And last fall, Tom joined what he called the best club that no one wants to be in, the Rock Steady boxing gym for people with Parkinson's disease, where he made so many new friends. From his first day there, Tom was moved by what he called the dedication of everyone he met. They inspired Tom, and he in turn gifted them with his warmth and humor and courage and love. The last months of Tom's illness were exceedingly difficult. It was such a hard road, but Sue, Lydia, Kyle, and Claude, you set upon it with such determination and courage, such love. You brought him home. You kindly and generously kept your doors open to all who wanted to spend time with Tom. And at the last, he wanted you, his family, his delight, his heart, to stay close. And you did. You took such good care of him. God bless you, Thomas George St. Thomas. May you be welcomed into the arms of our parents, and may you rest in peace. You are forever, forever in our hearts. We love you, Tom.
As you've heard, Tom was such a vital part of the First Parish Choir, and we are now going to hear from the choir a blessing for Tom. We will now hear from Tom's daughter, Lydia.
There's so much to say about my dad. He was a man of many interests and talents. Although shorter than expected and shorter than we wanted, the time he had here, he lived to the fullest. I'll talk about him and remember his humor, his brilliance, his loud voice, laughter forever, and I know all of you will too. Today, I'll share a few stories about how he taught Chloe, Kyle, and I to be compassionate, curious, and courageous human beings. When we heard the news from the doctor about Dad's tumor and his life expectancy, we sat in silence and in shock. Dad spoke first. He said, "I'm sorry that you have to deliver such difficult news. It must be hard for you." As Mom and I were sitting, still processing our sadness and fear, Dad's main concern was how the doctor himself might be feeling after sharing a terminal illness, a terminal prognosis with his patient. This particular example of my dad's consideration of others' feelings, very often putting them before his own, will always stand out in my mind. His heightened compassion for others was a beautiful and admirable trait, and one that I will forever endeavor to emulate. Dad always had a passionate curiosity for history, culture, and music. Those who knew him well know that he had a particular fascination and admiration for Native American history and culture. He taught Chloe, Kyle, and I to share this admiration. He did this by taking us to powwows regularly when we were children and telling us stories about different tribes and battles. He never glossed over or left out the reoccurring theme of unrequited wrongs. During our cross-country trip in the mid-90s, we stopped at the Pipestone National Park, and as we were walking along the trail, we came across a sweat lodge. I can recall how excited Dad was to come across this. He was under the impression that it was for tourist viewing, but it turns out that we veered off the trail somewhere and we weren't supposed to be there. The sweat lodge had just been used by the local tribe in a purifying ceremony required before they quarried the pipestone. Dad was apologetic, and somehow we were invited to view the quarry itself. I remember Dad being elated that we all got the chance to observe something so sacred. It was one of the highlights of that trip. Growing up, our home was full of art, literature, and music. Both Mom and Dad were musically inclined and had beautiful singing voices which filled our home. Dad sang in multiple choirs, including this church's choir, the BSUI Alumni Choir, and he also sang and played the harmonica in the male bonding band. He loved sharing songs with people. He would sit them down in the living room and say, "I want you to listen to this song." It did sometimes feel like a hostage situation because he wouldn't let you leave until it was over, and very often there was a post-listening discussion where he would share what he loved most about the song. When we asked Dad what music he might like played at this service to honor him, he said, "Play Garnet Rogers' Small Victory." So we'll all listen for him now.
business buying the mare like that, but buy her if you must. He bit the end off his cigar and spat it in the dust. She's old, she's lame and barren too, she's not worth feed and hay. But I'll give her this, he blew smoke at me, she was something in her day. I recall her well 10 years ago. She was a winner in her prime. She was fast and lean and willing, but they raced her past her time. And though she had the heart, her legs were gone, and it wasn't hard to see. They kept her at it in the hopes of just one more small victory. So she was shunted round from track to track, from Kentucky up to Maine. They'd run her in cheap claimers, all doped up to mask her pain. And if it's my advice you want, I'd say the poor thing's had her day. You'd be throwing good cash after bad, it's best you turned away. Well, they led her round the auction shed, and the bidding started low. She'll go for dog food, someone said, the market's been that slow. But she raised her head and pricked her ears, and before the hammer fell, she was mine. My friend turned round to me, you're soft-headed, I can tell. But she's been shoved from pillar to post, said I, and always done her best. They used her up, they wrung her dry, you'd think she'd earned her rest. So if she does not but end her days beneath some shady tree, I'll have saved her from the knacker's yard, and that's enough for me. That was near 2 years ago. She's filled out some since then. The more so since she's been in full. She eats enough for 10. And this morn as I crept to the barn around about 3:30, there stood nursing on still trembling legs one more small victory.
I'm going to tell one more story that captures Dad so perfectly. Nearly every summer, for about a decade, we would travel up to Nova Scotia. We would stay at a campground called McLeod's, Dad's favorite place on earth. A few of the campsites would overlook a beach, and there were bluffs on either side. Dad didn't frequent the beach. I think in the 10 years we went up there, he went into the water once. But on this day, he followed Mom, Kyle, and Chloe down to the beach with a book and a chair. Kyle, Chloe, and Mom went off to swim, and he sat down in his chair to read. Suddenly, he looked up and realized there were only 2 people in the water where before there were 3, and one person was waving their hands. So he ripped off his glasses and bolted into the water, scraping his shins on the rocks as he ran in. He swam as fast as he could, but as he got closer, he realized that it was not actually Mom, Kyle, or Chloe, but a couple he didn't know and had never seen before. Naturally, the first words out of his mouth were, "So where are you guys from?" Meanwhile, Mom, Chloe, and Kyle had walked to the other end of the beach to explore, and as they were walking back, Kyle said, "Oh, look, Dad finally got into the water." This was quintessential Dad. He loved to read above much else. He loved meeting new people. But he was always ready to jump into the water for us.
Mary already spoke to this, but I just have to add my deepest admiration for Tom's family. I have never witnessed such beautiful, tender-hearted, courageous, end-of-life care in my life. What a gift you gave your dad. That's clearly he gave so many gifts to you and helped you become the remarkable human beings that you are. And alongside his faithful, steadfast Sue. At this time, one of those remarkable human beings, another, is going to come up and share his stories and remembrances with us. What a privilege.
My dad marched to the beat of his own drum. That was for sure. He cared about the good stuff, the important things. He didn't care about much else. He wasn't distracted by material things or keeping up with the Joneses. Growing up, I can remember seeing my dad more often in a shirt and tie than in his paint clothes. In those days, he was trying to put his BSU education to use and become a kindergarten teacher. His ability to connect to kids was something he carried with him his whole life. It was his energetic, silly, and friendly disposition that kids connected with. After some years, the teaching thing fizzled out, but the teacher inside Tom never did. But he had a family to support, so he became devoted to his painting career. He loved being his own boss and having a flexible schedule so he could still be present for all things family. He was always around the home, working locally in whatever hours he wanted. He would joke about his work schedule. We're going to start late, we're going to take a long lunch, and we're going to quit early. This isn't to make light of his work ethic. He climbed around roofs for close to 40 years, and he found over the years the signature shiny silver paint he used had the best result when applied in sunlight. So he'd often come home sweat-soaked after an afternoon on a hot metal roof. But he always made time for family. He valued time spent with the ones he loved over having money for the nice car. His currency was time. That was just how he lived. I will always remember riding around in my dad's truck. You had to be pretty brave getting in that thing. I think over the years, the price of one of my dad's trucks was probably about $500. But he was proud of them. It was an easy way to show the world he was living a little bit differently. And there was nothing wrong with that. I remember him telling me when he was younger, he had a truck that's horn was broken, so it would randomly sound while he was driving. And he said he was unfazed, and it was pretty cool because he would just be constantly riding around waving to people. He loved yelling out the window while driving his truck. It was like he was out for a hunt, trying to find his friends out in the wild. He would get excited to see people he knew, and when I was driving with him, he would tell me a little background about the person as the truck slowed and we approached. Even more impressive than the drive-by hello was the top of the roof hello. A true sniper's perspective, the person on the ground usually was completely taken off guard and would spin around looking for where the sound was coming from. I think my dad got a kick out of that, finally yelling, "Up here!" With my dad, there was a sense of peace and serenity on the roof. When it came to meeting new people, my dad needed no introduction. He needed no common interest. His interest was you. If you didn't know anyone at the cookout, at the church, at the wedding, at whatever event or gathering it was you were attending, just give it time and you were going to meet Tom. He could tell when someone was new to a crowd or maybe uneasy in a setting, and he was an expert at making you feel welcomed and comfortable. He was so engaging. He always made great eye contact while seeming totally relaxed and interested. He listened intently with insightful and leading questions. The conversation just flowed. I've never witnessed someone communicate the way he did. People would talk to him for 5 minutes and say to themselves, "Okay, I can trust this guy." For as good as he was at talking, he was an even better listener. When you talked to him, there was nothing going on in his mind to distract. He was completely with you. This could lead to a very thoughtful response, or when the time was right, a witty comeback or one-liner. He had an ability to make nervous people feel comfortable. He could make quiet people come out of their shell, and he took pride in doing so. He made serious people crack a smile or even laugh. He was passionate about people and his relationships. One of our late conversations at the hospital, I asked what it was that made him so friendly. And he said simply, "I'm interested in people." He said he'd always been like that. That really was the essence of my dad in all his conversations. He didn't just want a small talk. He was curious about you. Where are you from? Who do you know? What can I learn from you? He trusted people first. He believed that people were good, and he brought out everyone's best qualities. Dad would always make friends on vacations. Some families come home with souvenirs. We came home with more friends. And I'm talking lifelong family friends, not just buddies. One of our first big vacations was cross-country to South Dakota. My dad had a passion for Native American culture, as Lydia mentioned, and this vacation was designed to see some Native American landmarks. Pipestone, Crazy Horse, saw Buffalo Jump, Badlands and the Black Hills. Well, we were driving through Milwaukee and we got a little lost. We weren't using a Garmin or any navigation, and just the old-fashioned way with maps. So we pulled over the camper and my dad hopped out on a mission to ask for directions. After a few minutes, I looked out the window and saw my dad was talking to a man, probably in his late 30s. The unusual thing was he appeared like he was out for a jog or some form of exercise. But that didn't deter my dad from stopping him. The conversation was clearly friendly, and I'm sure my dad was making him laugh and asking him lots of questions unrelated to actual directions. After what seemed like an eternity to a young kid, but was maybe about 30 minutes, I jumped out of the camper to go over and give my dad the "let's go" eyes. He, of course, introduced me proudly, and we talked a bit more. Funny thing would happen when I would insert myself into these conversations. It seemed like he wasn't talking to a stranger, but he already had made a friend. This was the case with this man, who we came to know as Ron Morey. Ron felt so comfortable with my dad, he invited us to his apartment for dinner. The three of us walked back to the camper and hopped in with Ron. My dad said, "This is Ron," excitedly. "We're going to his place." So Ron directed us to his place, and that night we ended up talking and laughing while enjoying some hot dogs. I think this was one of the first ways my dad taught us to have faith in people, and it's okay to trust a stranger. His positive and friendly demeanor was so genuine, he was constantly making fast friends, especially on vacations. We met David and Betty Ann in Nova Scotia. David became very close to my dad. We met up with them on future vacations. They even came down to Massachusetts to stay with us for a week. This was a friendship developed by another lengthy convo when my dad said hi as he saw David walking by our campsite. We met Jeffrey May at our favorite campground in Nova Scotia. Jeffrey worked at the campground, and my dad would actually join him on his trips to the local dump. While on vacation, my dad was doing dump runs and thoroughly enjoying it because he was spending time with a friend. On another occasion, my dad and I were walking to the bathroom at a campground, and some people pulled into the camp spot next to us. Naturally, my dad wanted to greet them. I simply didn't have the patience for this, so I continued to the bathroom. Of course, on my way back, he was still there talking. It wasn't until I was within earshot that I realized these people didn't even speak English. They were speaking French, and he was trying his best, acting out, making them laugh. Language wasn't a barrier for my dad. It wasn't. He could be standing in a room surrounded by people speaking Swahili, and he would try to talk to every one of them. He loved learning new languages and learning about new cultures. When he had the chance to learn a new language, he would learn how to say hello and how are you, and some of the greetings. And the next time he saw that person, he would remember how to say it, and it would make their day. My dad's kindness and thoughtfulness with others was often on display. My dad loved random acts of kindness. I can remember walking down the street as a kid, and he saw someone left their headlights on. And he just, not thinking twice, just walked over to see if the door was open, and it was, and he just shut off their lights for them. I can remember sitting in a tightly packed restaurant waiting for our food, when in the process, the server of placing the food down, the server knocked the the person's food down. In the process of the server placing the food down, the person dropped their fork. And without blinking, my dad just reached for his fork and just handed it to the man. There were times when my dad would talk to telemarketers for 20 minutes. Yeah. He had zero interest in purchasing anything. He just wanted to know how they were and where they were from. He wanted to know their story. I can imagine how draining a job may be, cold calling for 8 hours, hearing people curse at you, people hanging up on you, and the joy that person must have felt to hear a random man ask how their day was. And as Mary had mentioned before, I can't think of a more thoughtful act than taking the time and dedicating months to learning American Sign Language in support of his brother John's family. Empathy was another very strong trait. Many of the things my dad did would leave you scratching your head, saying, who does that? But that's what made him so unique, because truthfully, no one would do those things, but he did. It's hard right now to know the impact my dad will have on the world. But the way he carried himself and treated people, I think, will be motivation for others to live like Tom, to be comfortable in your own skin, to help others, to be present in the moment, to be enthusiastic and joyful. There's a quote by Maya Angelou: "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." I think so many of us will find the true memories of my dad will be a moment he made them feel something special. Whether it was a feeling of acceptance when you felt like you were on the outside looking in, confidence when you were vulnerable, comfort when you were going through a hard time, or just a simple laugh when you were having a tough day. Those will be the memories that will live on forever, because they are stored not in our heads, but in our hearts. As a kid, I didn't realize how generous my dad was being with his time. I just wanted to get the show on the road. Enough with all these 20-minute conversations. So I'd be all worked up and impatient and say, "Dad, why do you have to talk to everyone?" And he would reply, "Kyle, doesn't hurt to say hi." It was that simple with him. That was his motto. He was always going to say hi.
Thank you, Kyle, for sharing such a beautiful and full and shimmering portrait of your dad. We have another musical interlude to enjoy. Again, this was Tom's idea. It's a recording of a BSU alumni choir performance of the prayer. Thomas, St. Thomas, soloist. Okay. We have a medical professional, a doctor is here. Jeannie is going to assist. I'm going to invite us to take seats. Jeannie will assist and we'll call for emergency assistance. And we're going to pause, as Tom would want us to tend to one in need. Let's all take some deep, centering, body-nourishing breaths. If you need hydration, please have some water. If you need assistance with some water, just raise your hand. We'll get some to you. It's difficult to have an occasion like this, have an emergency situation, and be reminded of the fragility of our bodies. Let's take another breath. I want to invite you into a spirit of prayer, into a posture of prayer. I invite you to interpret that word prayer in the way that is most meaningful for you. And let us pray for Kathleen. Kathleen, who is a friend of the family and who's now in the hands of EMTs. And we'll pray that she's restored to good health, and pray for the caregivers who so promptly responded to her and are tending to her with care and compassion and skill. And let us all be reminded of how we need one another. As Tom knew so well, we need one another when we're vulnerable. We need one another to witness our joy as well as our vulnerability. And we're reminded by the response of the people in this room that we're not alone. And as Tom would have, we too respond in love and kindness, in care and generosity. And we will hold Kathleen in our hearts as she is treated, and we pray returns to full health. And let us now also continue in that spirit of prayer for Tom. Gracious God, source and ground of our being, we have uplifted the spirit of Thomas, St. Thomas, Tom, beloved child of creation, steadfast husband, father, brother, uncle, grandfather, and faithful friend. We commit his memory to our hearts and minds alongside the ancestors who have gone before. May our memories sustain and heal us with the balm of laughter and tears. And may Tom rest in the peace of our enduring love. Spirit of life and love, hold us now and always as we hold one another in compassion and kinship, in our grief and the love we share. Amen. And please rise in body if you feel called to, and rise in spirit if you are better off remaining seated. And we will sing our closing hymn, again, a selection by Tom for this day, Just As Long As I Have Breath. It's number 6 in the gray hymnal, but again, the words will appear on your screens. Please lend your voice to our song. Spirit of life and love, be with us. Give us the peace that passes understanding and the assurance of those things that never die, that pass from person to person, through the generations, unto eternity. Beauty, goodness, truth, joy, and most of all, love. In the spirit of love we have gathered, and in the spirit of love we depart. Amen. Please be seated to enjoy a postlude, special postlude in Tom's honor. That concludes our service in memory and honor of Tom St. Thomas. All are invited to stay, as I mentioned, for the reception. The food will be served from the lower parish hall. It is significantly cooler outside. You want to step outside and refresh a little bit and come back in. We are so happy to host you all here. Thank you for being with us.
Reception is down those stairs.
Thank you for sharing so much about your dad. You know, we all know Tom, but I know him better now. Good memories of your dad. Thank you for telling us. Very blessed. Then you, again, I'm so sorry if I helped you earlier. I always remember your dad talking about the tie-dye. He was always like, always tie-dye. I'm married.
So many people.
Here, you can deposit here.